All right, let's get going. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to have all of you here with us today. I'm Althea Taylor, Reverend Althea Taylor. I am the Executive Director of the Immigration Alliance, and it's my privilege and duty to welcome all of you to today's call with one of our, what I would like to begin branding as one of our source partners, the National Immigration Forum. Our purpose for being here today is that during this session, our guest, who I will introduce in just a few short moments, is going to be here to help us understand their organization and how they are serving our immigrants and immigrant communities as we desire to do the same here at the Immigration Alliance. With us today is the Vice President of Field and Constituencies, Mr. Adam Estle. Adam is, he brings a wealth of experience to this position that he holds with the National Immigration Forum. He helps to coordinate, or he coordinates the efforts for forums of Bibles, Badges, and Business for Immigration Reform Network, and serves as the liaison between field mobilizers and various constituency groups and the staff of the forum. Prior to joining the forum in 2015, he served as the Executive Director for Evangelicals for Middle East Understanding. He has directed a federally funded program providing housing and care for unaccompanied immigrant children, and he taught high school Spanish. He has served as a Bibles, Badges, and Business mobilizer for the Mountain West, and he is an accredited representative of the Board of Immigration Appeals through the Department of Justice. In 2015, he was the Islamic Speakers Bureau of Arizona. In 2015, the Islamic Speakers Bureau of Arizona honored him with their Hero Award for his multi-faith peacemaking efforts in Phoenix. Wow, that's a tongue tire. He's originally from Peoria, Arizona, where he currently resides. He graduated from Olivet Nazarene University and earned his master's in global leadership from Fuller Theological Seminary. He is more than qualified to speak to us on matters pertaining to welcoming and sojourning with immigrants here in these United States. But what's more special about Adam to me than even all of these credentials is that he is a friend. Adam and I have had the pleasure of knowing each other for quite some time. And so, Adam, it is with wonderful delight and pleasure that I welcome you to this gathering of constituents from the Immigration Forum and welcome you to speak with us today on the wonderful work that is taking place through the forum. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Althea. It's really great, an honor for me to be with you guys today. I was hoping that you would mention, Althea, that my best qualification here is being your friend and the work that we've done together in the Church of the Nazarene. In fact, in some ways, I can blame Althea for getting me into all of this mess when back in 2011, 2012, Althea reached out to our church here in the Phoenix area about opening an immigration legal resource center. And that was one of the transformative moments for me in this vocational journey toward loving and serving immigrants professionally. So I'd love to share a little bit about the work that we do. Althea, I'm wondering if you can make me a co-host so I can share my presentation.
I absolutely can, and I have some other people to let in the room, so let me do that really quickly while I am making you a co-host as well.
Excellent.
Oh, I gotta wait for your name to stop moving on my screen. There we go. Folks have entered, they've settled. Welcome to those of you who are just joining us. Our leader, welcome. It's good to have you with us again this month. And Romero is here. And I don't know, I'm not sure if Romero is the Romero that I know or if that's another Romero, but welcome to today's forum. And I'm going to make you a co-host. Yes, Adam, there you go.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
Presentation here. Okay.
Just before you go any further, I just want to make sure everyone is aware that we are recording this session. We record our sessions and we like to make them available on our website. So if anyone has a problem with that, please reach out to me directly. If you are not comfortable with us making the forum public on our website. Go ahead,
Great.
Adam. I'm sorry. Go right ahead. Back to
Okay,
you.
no, that's an important disclaimer. Great. So as Althea mentioned, I currently serve as the Vice President of Field and Constituencies with the National Immigration Forum. I've been in this role for about 5 years. And for those who are just joining, previous to that, I've had lots of adventures in immigration, including previously being an accredited representative, at that time through the Board of Immigration Appeals, although now it's Department of Justice, and directing a Center for Unaccompanied Minors here in Phoenix. We had unaccompanied minors between the ages of 3 and 12 in a foster care based model. So I've gotten to do a lot of different things in immigration. I like to start by just sharing a little bit more about kind of how I came to this work. When I was a high school Spanish teacher, I discovered that a few of my students were undocumented. I had no framework for that. I didn't know what to do about it, if I had to do something about it, or what my responsibilities were. Even growing up in Arizona, I grew up in a pretty sheltered environment in one of the Phoenix suburbs. And that was kind of the beginning of God speaking to my heart about his love for immigrants through a few of my students who couldn't fill out the free application for federal student aid because they didn't have a social security number. And so that was the beginning of my exploration of immigration, and led me down this wild and woolly path where I'm now doing a lot of advocacy work, something I never imagined I would do. But one thing that I've learned in this journey is a lot about God's sense of humor and about the adventure of serving Jesus when we continue to say yes to the things he puts in front of us. So I'll say a little bit about the National Immigration Forum. We are a nonpartisan advocacy organization building trusted relationships to create a shared vision for immigration in America. Our innovative approach leads the conversation on the value of immigration for a stronger, richer, and more vibrant America. So we are an advocacy organization. The work that I do right now is very little of it is direct services. I know a lot of the work of the Immigration Alliance is helping people who are doing direct services, and many of you are doing direct services work, which I will just say is the backbone of, it's the heart and soul of the work we do serving people. So those who are interacting with immigrants on the ground on a day-to-day basis, thank you. Because without your hard work on the ground, a lot of the advocacy work that we're doing wouldn't have as much impact. So we're so grateful for the on-the-ground frontline workers. So our work, we are making an impact in a few different ways. We do try to live up to our name as a forum, leading, convening, and guiding meaningful immigration debate with the purpose of influencing policy in a more compassionate and just manner. We activate people, mobilization through media and events, gathering thinkers, leaders, policymakers, legislators, and everyday people to take action to advance informed immigration policy. And we are advocates. We're looking to create a 21st century immigration system, which I'll talk more about, by developing and advancing innovative immigration policy solutions that serve the needs of the American worker and their families. As Althea mentioned, my role is helping to coordinate the Bible's Badges in Business network. So our tagline for that is, if you hold a Bible, wear a badge, or own a business, you want a common sense immigration solution. And our work in these 3 constituency groups has certainly grown over the years. We're working with veterans on immigration issues. We're just now beginning some national security work. But basically, we're gathering people who often are more moderate to center right in their politics and want to have a place to have a constructive conversation on what can be a very divisive and confusing topic. So for all of our work, we really focus on principles of advocacy. We think that this is a more evergreen approach than kind of chasing after whichever possibilities are in legislative scenarios in the moment. And so our BBB principles that we organize around, we say that for a better immigration system in the United States, we must do these following things. Recognize the need for safety and security on the border and in our communities. Show compassion and justice to aspiring citizens by allowing them an opportunity to earn lawful status and citizenship, key word being their earn. Continue to be a welcoming and compassionate nation that embraces humanitarian visa programs. Protect family-based immigration as a core aspect of our national values, and modernize our nation's laws so that the future immigration of workers is legal, fair, and orderly. So to find out more, we've gone into great depth on all of these principles, and if you are in agreement with those, we'd love to have you add your name as an endorser of these principles, and you can do that by visiting bbb'immigration.org. I'll note that our work is spread out across the country. We focus on about half of the states where we see an overlap of the needed cultural conversation, which is pretty much everywhere. We can have a better conversation about immigrants, and a political opportunity to help move, especially central right, more Republican candidates and office holders toward positive solutions for immigration. So you can see our list of priority states that we're focused on this slide here. So I want to talk about a few of our specific constituency groups before spending a bulk of my time on the evangelical work that we do. But just to touch on a few of the other aspects of our work, this is the badges sphere, is the Law Enforcement Immigration Task Force. And again, I won't read through these ones, but you can see the principles that we organize around with the LEITF. And basically, to sum it up, we are working with law enforcement officials who believe that the general public and the immigrant communities and their local communities, if they trust the local law enforcement and believe that local law enforcement is there to serve and protect, that actually makes all of us safer. So we've been able to partner with about 125 or so chiefs, sheriffs, public safety directors. They're called something different in lots of jurisdictions, but heads of law enforcement departments to carry forward the work of the Law Enforcement Immigration Task Force. And again, if you go to the website here, leitf.org, you can see if your local law enforcement leader is part of our task force. And if they are not, we would love to have a conversation with you about encouraging them to join us. I mentioned that another aspect of our work is with veterans. We discovered that a lot of military service members have been, since the beginning of our republic, immigrants themselves. And a lot of service members who are not immigrants often serve alongside immigrants. So we have a lot of veterans who support our Veterans for New Americans work, ensuring that immigrants are included in our military force readiness plans, supporting immigrant service members and their families. You can see some of the additional information there. And by the way, I'm happy to share this PowerPoint presentation with you, Althea, and you can share this with the members of the TIA, so folks don't have to try to scramble to take notes or anything.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I really want to spend the bulk of our time on the work that we do with evangelicals. Since that's the lane that TIA is in as well. And so we have a wonderful partnership with the organizations that make up the Evangelical Immigration Table. And you can see the current leadership organizations there. Many additional denominations are represented through the National Association of Evangelicals. If you don't see your denomination here, there's a good chance that they're part of the National Association of Evangelicals. And so it's important to note that the Evangelical Immigration Table is a coalition of these partners. It's not an official organization of any type. It's not something that the National Immigration Forum drives. We simply serve to convene this group and help to pull resources together for this crucial work with evangelicals on immigration reform. And as I've mentioned with the other groups, we have principles around which we organize, and you can see those here. They're pretty basic. This is, if you have ever tried to get a broad group of people to agree on things, it's good to stick with the basics. And so that's what we've done here, in case you're wondering why they're a little skinnier than some of our other principles. It's, something to try to keep people together. We try to keep these principles as brief as possible. So we are calling for bipartisan solutions that both offer a pathway forward for undocumented immigrants and also respect the rule of law. So part of the genesis of this evangelical work has come from some very troubling statistics and realities about evangelicals in this country who have not very positive understandings of the immigrants in our communities. So a few statistics to just put out there that we're working to change. 57% of evangelicals say that immigrants being in their community represents a threat or burden, and that number jumps to 69% of white evangelicals. Only 12% of evangelicals say their views on immigrants are primarily informed by the Bible. That's something that we're working to increase. And only 21% of evangelicals have said that they've heard immigration discussed in their church in a positive way that's encouraged them to love or serve the immigrants in their communities. So these are all statistics that we're trying with our work to change. Part of the work that we do is just encouraging people to understand what the Bible has to say about immigrants and about God's heart for immigrants. And so, everything from the fact that Jesus himself was a refugee or perhaps an asylum seeker, depending on how Egypt received the Holy Family. We don't have a lot of information about that, but for sure his family migrated to Egypt. We see throughout the Old and New Testament God's command to love the immigrant because they're made in the image of God, like every person. They have inherent dignity and potential. We see again throughout the Old Testament God's love and care for the vulnerable, of which immigrants are included, and sometimes we call the quartet of the vulnerable: the orphan, the widow, the poor, and the foreigner. And that we're commanded to love our neighbors, and that even though we try to put guardrails around that, God is clear to us in both Old and New Testament that there should not be caveats to our love for neighbor. We're also commanded to be subject to the governing authorities, and that's why part of our commitment as the Evangelical Immigration Table is to encourage and uplift and continue to enhance the rule of law as part of this immigration conversation. So to be very clear, in this recording, and for those who are watching live, we're not in any way, shape, or form advocating for or endorsing unlawful immigration. What we are saying is that no matter how people have arrived in the United States, they're made in the image of God and should be treated with compassion, as well as should follow our laws. And then, of course, Matthew 25 states pretty clearly, when we extend compassion to persecuted brothers and sisters, we're actually doing so unto Christ himself, Jesus said. So one of the additionally troubling things that's happening right now in our country is the way that we are in many ways decreasing our compassion and our welcome toward especially those who are fleeing persecution. A recent report, joint report from World Relief, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and the organization Open Doors USA, they created a report this summer actually called Closed Doors, in which they highlighted the decreasing number of Christian refugees to the United States from the 50 countries on Open Doors World Watch List, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. Open Doors annually produces a list of countries where Christians are facing persecution. And so you can see in 2015, there were just over 18,000 Christian refugees from the most persecuted countries. And then in this year, that number has dropped below 1,000. So these are all interesting statistics and everything. And I think it's important to always get to, so what should we do with what the Bible has to say about immigration and how we should respond? And so we've created this nice acronym that stands for PLEASE. And so the P is prayer and proximity, the L is for listening, the E is for education, the A stands for advocacy, and then we have service, excuse me, and evangelism. And I'm not going to touch on each of these. Prayer, I think, is pretty obvious. We should be praying not only for our neighbors, but praying for wisdom on how we advocate for, serve, love our neighbor. I do want to talk about proximity a little bit. So we just recently pulled together this list of ideas. People have been asking, how do I get to know my immigrant neighbor? I live in a community where it's not obvious to me where immigrants are. So we came up with this pretty extensive list of different ways you can reach out to immigrants in your community just to increase your proximity. One of the things that we've learned, and I'm sure many people watching this have learned personally as well, is that when you get to know someone in a situation like immigration, for example, you start to see a topic through the lenses of a relationship. And that often is transformative. Our president likes to say, sometimes people are afraid of the Maria or the Muhammad that they don't know, but they understand and value the Maria or the Muhammad that they know in their community. And so part of what I think we need to be doing in our country is increasing our proximity with those who are different than us. So lots of volunteer ideas here, support opportunities, just simple invitations, inviting an immigrant family for dinner, for example, taking part in social activities where immigrant families regularly participate, and then just simply smiling and being a humble and curious learner sometimes can go a long way toward increasing our proximity toward the other. And this list is available on the evangelicalimmigration.table.com website as well. So from my personal story, when I got accredited to practice basic immigration law and was serving people in our community, I had a great deal of frustration when I learned that there were a lot of people I couldn't help. All the work that I did, the 40 hours of basic immigration training and the shadowing and all of that, to sit across the table from people and get to the end of my intake sheet and say, oh my goodness, there's nothing that can be done here. That's what drove me to advocacy. And so I advocate for better policies for immigrants out of my faith and out of my desire for better systems that serve our neighbors well. And I always love to highlight this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. when he was confronted about the difference between charity and advocacy. And so I'm going to read this. King said in 1967, on the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside, but that will only be an initial act. One day we must come to see that the whole Jericho road must be transformed so that men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. And so this is the quote that I hang on to as I do my advocacy work. And again, I'll reiterate, those who are caring for the bloodied and beaten on the side of the road, God bless you. Your work is so important to be doing on the ground and so necessary. But I think we also have to take an account of the systems that continue to oppress people. And I would say that our current immigration system could be included in that. And so I wanted to highlight a lot of opportunities and resources on the Evangelical Immigration Table website. Looking here, let's see if the PowerPoint will allow me to get to the site. All right, well, trust me, if you go to that.
Are you trying to highlight it?
It's fine, yeah. If people go to this Take Action website, they can see a lot of other opportunities for advocacy too. And then, of course, the other end of advocacy is those who we are advocating toward. So one thing that is a reality about immigration is that by and large, it's a federal issue. The federal government determines who comes in and who stays and who is removed. So we're working to advocate with our federal legislators on immigration reform. And one of the things that we believe strongly in is a middle ground approach. So our legislators could respond with a program of mass deportation. And you can see some of the statistics here that show how detrimental, even economically, that would be to our country, aside from all of the challenges and hardships that would bring to mixed status families. If we tried to deport 11 to 12 million people in the country undocumented. On the other end of the spectrum is the idea of amnesty, which is a total forgiveness, which theologically I'm definitely not opposed to, and grateful for the amnesty that Jesus has shown each of us and continues to do so. But when it comes to immigration policy, some of the problems with that could be that it sends the message that the law doesn't matter and could encourage future unlawful immigration. So our idea is that a middle ground approach is around this concept of restitution, allowing people the opportunity to get right with the law. So what we mean by that, and again, you can visit the Evangelical Immigration Table's website to see more details. But briefly, to summarize, we're saying that there has to be the creation of some sort of line for people who are undocumented in this country to get in. We think that line should be accessible, but also rigorous. So there should be a fine that people have to pay. They should prove that they have that they don't have criminal they have not committed violent crimes in this country, that they're willing to learn English and go through other, whatever hoops that are realistic and accessible that are created. I think we'd be okay with. And across the country, immigrant populations that we talk to, undocumented folks have said, just show me the line, tell me what I have to do, I'll do whatever it takes to be able to get right with the law. So this is the approach that we're really advocating for. And I'll say, even in such a hyper-partisan environment that we live in, one of our top supporters of this effort is a very conservative Republican congressman from Alabama, who has helped us develop some of the principles, again, that you can see on the Evangelical Immigration Table's website around this concept of restitution. And happy to answer any questions that come up about that at the end of it. A couple of our other sort of cousin efforts that I wanted to draw attention to and encourage people to follow and get to know are the Voices of Christian Dreamers. Many of you probably are familiar with the concept of dreamers, young people who were brought here at a young age. Many of them came in an unlawfully or overstayed a visa. And of course, there's been lots of efforts over the past 10 years or so, beyond that really, to try to help these folks regularize their status. So if you go to christiandreamers.us, you can see the efforts of a group of really fantastic young followers of Jesus who are also dreamers, who are advocating for their cohort and for the church to understand the plight of these young people. And then I'll also draw your attention to a newer effort, womenofwelcome.com. And this is a digital community of Christian women committed to living out Christ-like hospitality. And there's a lot of great resources again on their website, womenofwelcome.com, that I would draw your attention to. So lastly, I would just say, I'm speaking to the choir. I know that TIA call, but I hope everybody is involved in this issue in a positive way. We really have learned that immigration can be an animating issue for a lot of people who are conservative and moderate. And for a long time, these folks have not been talked to about a compassionate approach to this issue, which we believe strongly is not a progressive issue or a conservative issue. It's an American issue, it's a Christian issue. And so we really are hopeful that some of our nonpartisan strategies to persuade and mobilize folks into more constructive advocacy will continue to grow. And you can see my my email address there. I'd be happy to engage with any of you in helping your community take steps toward more advocacy that I can. And so, Althea, I'm happy to take any questions that the group may have or that you may have.
Thank you, Adam, so much. This is definitely a benefit, I believe, for all of us today. I do have some questions for you, but I just wanted you to know that I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us, because it was just last month that we launched what we're calling this fall an initiative called Change Agents. And surely what you have shared with us today is a part of adding to what we hope will begin to be a toolkit that we're building, because in that kit we are seeking to inspire those who are doing the work on the front lines, and I believe that you have definitely given some inspiration here today for us to inform us as we are seeking to serve immigrants, and you have provided information that is helping us. But not only are we raising the awareness that are around the issues, and you've raised a few things that I'm going to highlight in some questions to you, but you are also giving us ways to take action, ways that we can begin to be engaged, perhaps in different ways. I thought it was quite interesting that you said, as Board of Immigration Appeals, when you have sat across the table and you've done the intake forms and you've completed the applications, and then all that you possibly could do to help someone, and you had reached the end of your road and you were like, but what else can I do? You found that advocacy was a step for you. And I'm really, really happy to hear that, because I do believe that lending our voice to helping to shape the narrative, not just the narrative of those who are looking to sojourn, but helping to shape the narrative of reform in our country for immigrants, and how that can come about where we're not throwing grenades at each other on opposite sides of the aisle and trying to depoliticize this a little bit, because at the end of the day, people are involved in the middle of this. They're at the crosshairs, and they are the ones who are suffering. So I want to say a heartfelt thank you for really highlighting and pointing out just some of the things that we're seeking to do and to strive to accomplish with Change Agents. And the fact that you brought the Bible, and it just does my little preacher's heart really well, because I believe that grounding things in Scripture helps to anchor the reason behind why we do what we do. But I do have some questions for you, and one in particular I'll begin with, and then I'll open it up for everyone else to be able to grab some questions as well before our time runs out. Just for a moment, if I can just dip my finger into the political landscape that we're in right now, one of the things that we have talked about in our country and in our nation, especially in this time that we're in, is around our economy. And the way the economy has thrived, and it has done so well. Many of us understand, or at least I believe the people who are involved in the work of serving immigrants understand that our economy has not been built without immigrants. Immigrants have been a vital part of it. And on one of the slides, you showed the significant decline in the number of immigrants that have where we have gone from. I think that the high was somewhere around 18,000 and something was the number of immigrants. Yeah, there you go, right there, 18,462 back in 2015. And by the middle of this year that we're in, we are down to 946. This is the arrival of refugees, the study through World Relief in the USA, and of course, other immigrants who may or may not have come in other ways. What is there, because of BBB being involved, especially with business, could you speak a little bit to the impact that is having or potentially has on the economy and the robustness of the economy if we are losing our immigrants? I know part of the narrative is that immigrants are taking the jobs from those who would otherwise are not able to find a job because immigrants are taking the job. That's part of the narrative. But from the work that you've done, could you speak to us a little bit about what you are seeing, especially since you're engaged in with business owners?
Yeah, absolutely, Althea. I think one of the things that has to be talked about is the work that many immigrants fulfill in our communities that, frankly, many US citizens these days aren't willing to do. So there's many studies about, farm work is a perfect example of that. Farms in California and elsewhere in the country are desperate for workers, and they, put out all sorts of advertisements, and they even hire some native-born Americans to do the work, and they don't last on the job because the work is so hard. And in a robust economy, what we see is, a lot, even fewer native-born people want to do that kind of manual labor. And so we need more immigrant labor that is willing to work in some of those sectors. The other thing I would say is that study after study shows that immigrants are actually job creators. Not only are they entrepreneurs and small business owners at a much higher rate than native-born Americans, which of course then, creating small businesses creates jobs for other native-born Americans, but they also are, crucial in our supply lines. So if you remove immigrants from, again, the farm work industry, then what you're doing actually is eliminating jobs up the chain, from the distributors to the owners of the farms to, the grocery store produce manager who doesn't have a job anymore because the fruit is not getting picked. A lot of the work that immigrants do actually support jobs up the chain that I think is part of the conversation that sometimes gets missed. So there's just a lot of dynamics. I mean, right now with COVID-19, one of the things that's also true is that immigrants are disproportionately involved in a lot of essential work, from healthcare to hospitality industry, first responders. We've got lots of immigrant firefighters fighting fires in this part of the country. And so across the board, I think you could see immigrants who are contributing in many ways to the robust economy that we enjoyed before the pandemic. And I would also just say, one of the things that we're hopeful for is a conversation that can continue to see immigrants as essential workers and part of not only the relief from the pandemic right now, but part of the recovery. We're hopeful that there could be some aspects of whatever economic recovery happens, whatever administration is calling the shots in January, there's going to have to be a lot of legislation around economic recovery from the pandemic. And I think it's pretty obvious to us that immigrants should be included in that conversation.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you. I'm going to open it up if there are any questions that our constituents might have as a part of this forum. You all are muted at this time, but if you do have a question, I invite you to unmute at this time and to present your question to Adam. I don't want to hug all the time, so is there anyone else? Well, I do have another question, so I'm going to fire away and maybe it'll spur somebody on. I want to go back to the acronym that you had from the Evangelical Immigration Table, which is also another source partner for us. But how should I respond? Because I love for us to always have a takeaway, an actionable item. We don't just want to be informed and be inspired, but we want to take action, which is one of the things I stated as a part of this whole Change Agents initiative that we have launched in this fall/winter season. You talked about prayer and proximity and how we get to meet if our world is not naturally intersecting with those who are immigrants. But talk to me a little bit about, and you've talked about advocacy, but talk to me a little bit about the education piece and the service piece. I know you didn't go into them, but could you highlight where those are actionable items for us? How do we get involved with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for asking. So I think the education piece is actually twofold, because I think, first of all, in order to speak into such a complicated topic like this, we have to continue to educate ourselves. And there are great resources for that. I would commend first and foremost a book that changed a lot for me in this space, and that's Matt Soren's and Jenny Yang's Welcoming the Stranger, as a fantastic resource to understand biblical basis for this. They actually just came out with a new edition of their book, I think last year, maybe the year before. It's all running together now. But we have to continue to be educated about this topic of immigration that is always changing. And so continuing to, I see Pat Hatches on this line. Pat has a great newsletter that she puts out to keep people informed about what's happening about immigration. The National Immigration Forum, we send out a daily news clips called Nurani's Notes that folks can sign up for, that will help just stay up on what's actually happening with this fast moving conversation. So that's the first part I would say, is continue to educate ourselves. And then the follow on to that, which may seem obvious, but then we have the opportunity to educate those in our circles, whether it be family members, friends, the people in the offices where we work, whatever our sphere of influence is. There's a lot of misinformation out there, especially as we are in this election season. It's just so much misinformation, and a lot of people have misconceptions. In my conversations with people across the country, it's a lot more frequent that I have the opportunity to engage with someone who really is curious but seems to be getting information from wrong sources than that I interact with someone who really is anti-immigrant. I think most people are just getting some bad information from the wrong sources, and then they kind of base their beliefs off of that, their actions off of that. And so I think continuing to spread the correct information, from helping people understand what the Bible has to say on this topic. We touched on a few verses, but we are running a campaign with the Evangelical Immigration Table called the I Was a Stranger Challenge, where we have 40 days of different scriptures that folks can read that deal with immigration. And we have some graphics that people can share on social media to just encourage a better biblical understanding of this topic. So those are a few of the dynamics of education that I would speak to. And then with service, I mean, TIA is doing a great job of pointing people toward, legal services, helping people to understand how they can become citizens, how they can, learn English. I think all of these ways of serving immigrants in our communities is crucial and a fantastic way for churches, local churches, to show immigrants, not just talk about their care for immigrants, but to show tangibly our care for immigrants. I know I see Arlita here. It's great to see Arlita. Our Nazarene churches, who are engaged in this, and other denomination churches who are engaged with this. Every time I talk to someone who's engaged in serving, ministering to immigrants, I hear a similar story. Not only do we have the opportunity to help people with their immigration legal needs, but we have the opportunity to share the love of Jesus through those interactions. And that is obviously the end game for us as followers of Jesus. We want to love people into relationship with him. And if we can serve and meet their basic needs as well, that's just a fantastic extra thing that goes along with it.
Thank you so much. I have another question, but I don't want to hog, so I'm going to pause and allow anyone else who has a question. I see Arlita has unmuted, so wonderful. Yay, go ahead, Arlita.
Well, I'm just going to do a follow-up on what Adam said. At our immigration center at our church, we bring in about 100 new citizens per year. And so 4 times a year, we bring those new citizens and their families before the church on Sunday morning and introduce them and just tell where they're from and a little bit about their story, a very little bit about their story. But let our people see who the immigrants are. And they're always just amazed that they're not all Mexicans who are just coming over the border in droves. Yeah. I mean, they are refugees from all over the world. And They are people who they may know in the community. They may be people who are sitting beside them in the pews and they didn't know that they were not yet citizens. So that's been a big part of education in our church. But we began with a 40-day challenge and the bookmarks, and then did Welcoming the Stranger, and had about 80 people in a Wednesday night study. And they sat around tables, but they couldn't sit with their family members or anybody in their Sunday school class. And there had to be at least two people who spoke Spanish and two who spoke English. And, we just divided up the people who normally sit together, and then had discussions on a lot of the topics that are at in each of the chapters. And that was so powerful. It just totally changed people's ideas of what immigration was about.
Wonderful. Thank you, Arlita. Thank you. You must. We don't believe those things, but we're in the same arena in terms of what we're thinking, because you said something that triggers a question I was going to come to Adam with, and I said the question was that in the context in which we're living in, I think a lot of the immigration story has been framed around immigrants who are from Mexico. And while that is a significant part of the story here in the United States, I can remember, 3.5 years ago or so, there was a Muslim ban, and there was a push to block those who were coming and who were here from other countries, Muslim countries. And I want to harken back to when I first met you, how many ever years ago when we met, the work that you were doing as it pertains to the Muslim community where you were there in Phoenix. And I just want to ask you just from a personal standpoint, how has your experience merged with what do you see happening now with the work that you're doing at the National Immigration Forum, and even the work that you were doing prior to joining the forum? How was your work with those from the Middle East being informed? Because the story of immigration is far more diverse than just our brothers and sisters who are coming from south of our borders, but people are coming into the United States through many points of entry, border entries here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Althea. And thanks for that story, Arlita. I love to hear when your church does that Citizenship Day. Yeah, I mean, the simplest way I can put this, the relationship that the Lord has helped me and our church develop with our Muslim community here in Phoenix, is we have embraced our neighbor and they have embraced us. And there have been amazing opportunities for us to demonstrate that love for each other. About 5 years ago, there was a protest by some Second Amendment rights people who decided that they were going to go and protest the local mosque in Phoenix. This was around the time when there was some very unfortunate things happening nationally, and the tensions with the Muslim community were very high. And so we found out about this protest that heavily armed people were going to be visiting our neighbors. And so a few of us just called our friends at the mosque and asked how we could be helpful. And their response to us was that they would love for us to just show up. And I said, well, yeah, I can do that. So we called, we put out some notices on Facebook and we called a few people. And the next day was when the protest happened. We had about 200, mostly followers of Jesus, but people of other faith traditions, who had come to support our Muslim neighbors and sort of form a human chain around the mosque, protecting them. And the Phoenix PD was there, and they were fantastic and helped keep things from escalating. But that was a real tangible way where our friendship was able to be real. And I'll say, the follow-on from that was a week later in the mosque at Friday prayers, me being handed a microphone and being asked to share why did we stand with our Muslim neighbors. And I had told them
Wow.
beforehand, I had warned them, Althea, I said, if you give me a microphone, I'm going to talk about Jesus. And they were like, that's fine. Just don't talk about, Nazarene or Christian or what. I was like, that's fine. I'm going to talk about Jesus. And they gave me the microphone anyway. And I was able to say, friends, the reason that we showed up to be with you that day was because we believe that's what Jesus asked us to do. So when we are able to take some risks in love for our neighbor, I mean, that was risky. I have never been around more guns than I was that day at that protest. I mean, you would have thought some of those people were gearing up to go to Afghanistan or something.
Wow.
And, just that opportunity, it seemed like a simple thing in the moment. It seemed obvious that we were going to stand with our friends. And then I had the opportunity to share at the mosque about Jesus and the difference that he makes in our lives. And so that's kind of an extreme example, but I think, there are many examples of the way that we truly attempt, not always perfectly, but to live out our faith and live out the love that Jesus has given us that we can give to our neighbors, and the doors that opens to the gospel.
Wonderful, wonderful. I got goosebumps when you said the story. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I'm excited. Yes. We have time for maybe one more question. Time is leaving us. I want to value your time, Adam, and those of everyone who's participating in the call. I see Pat is unmuted. I'm not sure if Pat has a question, but if there's anyone else that has a question, we have time, I think, to take one more question.
Oh, my question is if the slides could be sent to those that participated. I am so sorry that I missed the major part of your presentation, Adam. So I'd love to see the slides. And if I could just make, great, thanks. If I could just make two quick remarks. One is, of course, one way to help our neighbors is through ESL programs, and many churches do have that program. And many of them have now gone online to teaching through Zoom. And under Mission to North America, the Mission to North America ESL program has instructions online for Zoom teaching. And they also have instructions for the students in several different languages about how to connect through your smartphone to Zoom in order to be able to be a student on ESL. So some of our ESL programs have gotten very creative. One thing I would say, though, is even in churches with ESL programs, often it's a small portion of the congregation that's involved. So I think it's important that we challenge our congregations that have ESL to find creative ways to involve more members of the congregation in that, maybe as a prayer partner for one particular student, maybe to just check in with one student once a week and see how things are going on in their lives, but just ways to make it a total congregation effort. The other thing that I'm excited about is that more and more denominations and more missions agencies are beginning to recognize what they're labeling as Diaspora Missions as one of the opportunities of the moments. So churches that have always had a heart for missions, but they've always been globally focused and have never made the connection between those that the Lord has brought near to our own communities. So I think it's a great opportunity to help our churches to see the connectedness between their interest in overseas missions and look what the Lord has done. For years, we've prayed that the Lord would bring people who don't know him to know him. And look what he's done. He's brought them to our own backyards, our own neighborhoods. So how can our foreign missions have any integrity if at the same time we're sending out somebody else far away to learn a language, spend years to get credibility? At that same time, we're ignoring people from those same countries that the Lord has put in our own communities. That's a big disconnect for many believers. And I think we need to make those connections so that people begin to understand Acts 17, 26 and 27 says that the Lord defines the boundaries and the times that people live in various places. And so for his sovereign, in his sovereign plans, when someone comes to the United States, they may have a plan, but the Lord in his sovereign will has a bigger plan. And some of them are already believers, and they may become the most essential member of our church because they may be the arm or leg we've been missing. Some of them are not yet believers, and they are seeking. And that's what Acts 26 and 27 says, that they might seek him and perhaps find him. But that depends on us to be the church, to be the believers that reach out to them, engage them, and love them into the kingdom.
Well, thank you, Pat. That is just amazing. Absolutely. We underscore all that you have said. I can surely share with you that in my church, when we were beginning to turn towards wanting to be engaged in immigration work, one of the first things we did was that we actually held classes at our church to teach our English speakers conversational Spanish. Because
Great.
one of the biggest ways that you can show people that they are welcomed and that you have respect and appreciate them is to speak to them in their heart language. They'll just appreciate the attempt to speak the language, even if you don't get it perfectly right or the pronunciation. The fact that you've tried means that it's not just them adjusting to you, but you making the effort to adjust to them. And so I underscore everything that you say and just say thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. Well, folks, our time has passed. It has left us. It is 1 minute to the hour, and we try to keep these calls to 1 hour. Adam, I wish I was close enough to give you a hug, but I'm not, so we'll just have to take a virtual high five at this point. Thank you so much for being here with us, and it's good to connect like this. When all of this is over, I've got to get myself back out to Phoenix so I can come and see my friends down on that side. The only church that almost got me to leave New York is your church. It's just, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be with us today. The work that we are striving to accomplish through the Immigration Alliance is to really broaden how we support you in the work that you do. Sometimes it's just going to be inspirational because things get really rough and you're wondering whether or not you can keep going. And we want to be here to inspire you. For the technical assistance and connecting you with those who can train you to do the work in the trenches of being able to take the intake forms and complete the applications, we want to be able to serve you in that way. But I also believe we want to be able to have you participate in doing advocacy work on behalf of those who you are serving, where you're just able to speak up for those who don't have a voice by signing a letter, by understanding what the issues are, by possibly even making a phone call to those who might be in your jurisdictional area, whatever it is. We believe that God is calling us to be change agents, and to be change agents not only by welcoming the strangers within our gates, welcoming the immigrant with hospitality, but also being able to be their voices when their voices are not being heard. So for your participation in today's call, I say thank you so much. Look out for what's going to take place next month in November. We're going to be doing this every month and until the Lord comes or something changes in immigration. But I'm so glad that you're all a part of the work that we're doing here at the Immigration Alliance. Adam, again, on behalf of the Immigration Alliance, we just delight in working alongside the National Immigration Forum and having you as a part of today's call. I look forward to us joining hands and hearts together in the future. God bless all of you today in all the work that you're doing. And may he give you peace.
Because the immigrants, most of them cannot. So we need to.
That's right. I voted yesterday. Vote, 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 vote. I didn't tell you who to vote for. I just said vote. Make sure you vote. God bless you all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Althea. Thank you, Adam.
This call will be posted, by the way.
That's great.